previous episode. So this leads really well into kind of the next question here. Chris, you were kind of mentioning ratios of force, which is data that we could get off a 1080, or if you use timing gates for a force velocity profile. I kind of want people to hear the similarities in all of your programs and then some of the differences. So the scenario is a coach walks into your weight room right here, right now, today, and they say, hey, I've tested it. I've measured it. I have a high school, or in your case, Cal, a college athlete who is low on horizontal force, right? We're going to trust him. His testing methods are good. Hey, Chris Caldan, I have a athlete low on horizontal force. Show me what you do with an athlete that is testing weak horizontally and cannot produce force. So for all of you, and we could repeat the same order here, we'll go Dan, Cal, Chris. What are your heavy exercises? What are you doing to get athletes stronger for acceleration to produce more horizontal force?
Am I first?
Yes.
So one of the things I think is a huge key is isometrics. I've gravitated towards using what I call the hover deadlift, where I split my feet with a hex bar, and we go as heavy as we can for 20 seconds, and we keep that weight 1 millimeter off the ground. It's not allowed to touch the ground, but you have to sense from a proprioceptive feel where 1 millimeter off the ground is. And then you got to hold it there. Okay, then you can complete the rep, you can put it down, you can do whatever, but it's a 20-second hold, as heavy as possible, trying to hone in on, because isometrically and from a proprioceptive standpoint, it's like a GPS system. I want to know exactly where my joints are, and I want to know exactly how to distribute forces. Because, you know, when you're talking about tendon stuff, when it comes to running, yes, the midfoot and the intrinsics of the foot are important, but those muscles or the tendons above the knee are different than the tendons below the knee, right? So they need to be trained differently, right? I think you can really train those tendons above the knee with that hex bar hover deadlift. So we've spent a lot of time dividing up our training into acceleration-based runs, which is a lot of what we do, and some max velocity stuff. But everything is going to have foot strengthening in it with the toe pro, and it's going to have some type of hover deadlift.
All right, wonderful. So Cal, same question there. Coach comes to you, hey, this guy is weak horizontally. You could trust it. He wants to know, like, man, what are you doing? What would you do? And let's say this is a college athlete, since that's your world.
Obviously, I go back to isometrics, and the one that seemed to work for most people when I split it up into 3 different variations of exercises, it was the isometric reverse hyper for that first step. If you can't display the force through your foot, as Dan said, then you got no shot. Right? You're not, if your feet are weak, then the brain will downregulate your power output instantly.
Yeah, and it'll put your heel on the ground too.
Yeah. So, and then honestly, we did a bunch of testing just 2 weeks ago on the Yuri exercise. Even though it looks like a top end speed exercise, I was actually shocked at how the Yuri exercise, the horizontal, I call it horizontal hip. If you look up Yuri exercise, you'll find it with horizontal standing. It's on my YouTube page. It was pretty scary on how it, and this is shocking to me after using the Yuri for 6 years, how it increased the first 3 strides in my athletes. We're talking 4 or 5 reps. He did the Yuri in 4 or 5 reps of acceleration in 10 meters. And the Yuri was actually the most beneficial in causing a positive response, which it looks like a top end speed, and it is. But I assume it's just a potentiator with all the bands that are in there.
What's the most number of bands that you put on that rack? How thick have you gone?
It goes up to 4, but they're staged, right? So as you get a bigger push, So you might start with just 2 bands at the beginning when your hips touch it, and as you progress, you grab a third, and then at the end, you'll probably move that last band about a foot, maybe 6-8 inches.
Okay.
Yeah, and the Yuri's just spelled U or a Y-U-R-I, and that was, I just couldn't believe it. Which then it just, I added into my programming on days that we had a more focus-based acceleration in between our training sets.
Okay.
I could
Awesome.
go on and on, but that's enough, I think.
And so when you're doing your isometric reverse hyper, is that pulling against the chain, so overcoming, or you come up with the weight and you try to resist it so it's more yielding?
No, it would honestly, yeah, it's an overcoming.
Okay.
And then I do it. So then for people, if you look on my YouTube page, please notice if you do any of my reverse hypers are always contralateral. So if your right leg's pushing and overcoming something, you only grab on with your left hand.
Mhm.
Right. And then also the big one on that is the toe glute reflex method, right? Making sure you're squeezing that big toe. Because it's profound the amount of activation that takes place through the whole chain. Right. And people say it's the Babinski. By definition, it's not the Babinski. Just look up toe glute reflex, and that's what you're looking at, right? Is using that
Mhm.
big toe to help activate that glute.
And just to compliment you, Cal, I think you always do a wonderful job when you talk about something new. You always go back and kind of cover the basics that you've talked about and covered for 10 years or more. So I'm always very grateful for that. All right, Chris, same question to you. You were referencing earlier on trying to improve RF max kind of beyond those 3 steps. So it seems like this is your world and kind of what you're into right now.
Well, if I've got my 1080, I'm going to set a brake on it. So we're going to go, whether it's 2.5 meters a second or 3 meters a second, whatever. Because when you hit a resistance and you're going horizontally, your natural response to that is to drop that shin down to push. It's kind of like, if you're going to push a car, the smart guy who gets there first gets down low and you see him line up his shins and he's going to go. And then you got the old guy who's dropping his beer to come help and he's pushing up on top, up high. But in order for him to get a force to go horizontally, he's got to drop his shins down. So that's what I'm trying to replicate by putting a speed brake on it, that you can get out on your first couple of steps and get that good horizontal push. But once you hit that speed brake, or the isokinetic, you've got to keep your shins down to keep that force going horizontally, because if not, you'll get stood up. I've also put the 1080 in the back of my car, so it's elevated a bit more. So now you're not getting this diagonal force to pull forward, you're getting a straight horizontal force. So again, you've got to drop your shins down to go through that.
I like that.
Now, if somebody doesn't have a 1080, Chris, could they sprint with a sled?
Take out a loan.
Yeah, could they sprint with a sled, pulling a sled and have some slack in the line? So they take 2-3 steps and then the slack of the 1080, or excuse me, the sled cord goes out and then they kind of hit there?
They could, but that's a pretty shocking pull.
Mhm.
I think if you attach a rubber band between the belt and the sled, it's going to give you a little bit more cushion so you don't get cut in half.
Okay.
I kind of I want to do this, but I'm going to get in trouble. Steal a shopping cart,
Mhm.
and then you can push the shopping cart. That seems to be a really good angle to keep your shins down low and push back out. Whether it's resisted or I prefer resisted from behind.
Dan, do you still have that shopping cart you slept in?
I changed the wheels on it too.
Right, it was right. You left it
Yeah.
outside the Waffle
Yeah.
House, though.
The
I
Waffle
know.
House.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what was that lady with no teeth doing with you on that cart?
Well,
Flow.
That's not this podcast. That was the other one I was on. I tell you what I use for acceleration. Remember the old school bullet belt?
Yeah, those are
We
good.
screw around with them all the time. I've got 40 of them, right? So we wheel them out, and every kid puts it on at football practice, and we do everything with the belts on. Every kid has a belt. And then the partner he's working with, let's say you're an offensive lineman, you're working with that partner, you got the tail, boom, we put on the Velcro, and they're ripping through everything so they can feel the position to be in, and they can bang their shins out of it, and they're already in that position. They can't break free from the cord unless they're applying the right force. It's a poor man's way to do it, but it's pretty effective to make your strength work go right along with your individual work in football or hockey or whatever you're doing. They have it on them the entire practice.
And I really think that those steps 3, 4, 5, 6, that's the key. Because I think we're all pretty good at training people to use force to get out and get good shin angles coming out. You know, if you're a field sport athlete, now you've got to do that multi directions. But to truly accelerate, it's really steps 3, 4, 5 that's really going to separate you're truly elite with not so elite. And I think we saw that down in Charleston when, what was that guy's name again?
Ooh, Nick Harbor.
Did he get picked up by someone?
I think he's got another year left.
Remember how he hit 6 meters a second on his second step in basketball shoes?
Yeah, he was ridiculous.
That's why he's 9'9".
But understand what his feet look like. We both looked at him and we're like, holy shit. His feet were like ironclads, like rigid. Now, here's the other part of that, and Cal talked about it, strengthening your foot to be in those positions. And then what happens is once your foot hits down and you're out in front, then your vestibular system's playing a role. Sometimes when Chris talks about steps 3, 4, and 5, you're trying to quickly recover your feet, but you still are in an acceleration process where you have time to push. And I think that's what happens to people. They get a good initial push, and then they try to fast feet their way back to balance instead of push themselves into 3, 4, and 5, right? They end up standing up and their feet go real quick.
And I think that initial velocity getting out of the gate is huge because that's the velocity that gives you your stability to be able to get into those positions. Yeah. If you're going slow, you suddenly just can't jump into that position. You've got to have an initial velocity that gives you the stability to go.
So to follow up for you, Chris, and Cal, I'm going to have a follow-up for you.
Cal's busy shopping for shoes.
It's summer. You gotta have a good pair of shoes on you. So, Chris, you mentioned a shopping cart, but I've also heard you say in previous talks an empty sled. So that way you could kind of turn your feet over faster. So for coaches that don't want to steal a shopping cart and they have a bunch of prowlers or sleds hanging around, could they hold high on the handles for acceleration? Can they put a bunch of band tension across and be pushing like that? Would that work?
When I had a prowler spread, I took PVC pipes and I just cut them to about 10 inches. I slid them over the top, so when you push out, you're low, but as you drive up, you gradually work your way up the pipe. So that way, you're working a true acceleration body position scenario instead of just driving straight ahead, keeping your nose down. Although Dan had a really good video of his skill guys pushing a sled across the field, and he had their hands down low just so they could keep their heels up and drive forward.
Yeah, and we were looking at matching that shin angle and forget what the upper body's doing because the sled is actually holding it in position. I like take the water bag and resist yourself running, but carry that water bag for 3 or 4 steps. So now you're creating those co-contractions of which you need to ricochet, right? And that would be, remember the dowel with the bands, Chris, in the acceleration? I think that's a big part of acceleration is you have to be creating instability up top to motor organize down low. And I think the water bags that Cal talks about, I think that's what's happening. You're motor organizing. That's what happens. You create unstable surface up top. Everything down low better be in perfect position or else you're going to fall flat on your face.
No, that makes sense. And now for you, Cal, kind of follow up of, hey, I have an athlete who's low on horizontal force. We've already recorded an episode about to squat or not, but just wanted to hear your thoughts for people that may be new to you. Why did you not say, oh, increase your back squat, oh, increase your deadlift? Can you just give us a 1-2 minute thought there?
Well, look, like I think in the younger athletes, those always work, right? I'm not gonna lie. But then there's a point where there was no return, and you got a guy that's running a 5.4, 5.5 meters per second on his third step, and you want to get him to 5.7, 5.8, 6 if possible. Increasing your squat's not going to get there because there's too much force being generated too fast. So it's not like it's, you know what I mean? It's just not going to get a return on it.
At
They're just not.
at different angles too.
And it's different angles. And honestly, with Dan and the hex bar hover deadlift, you're just training in a very specific angle, right? It's not that lift; it's that angle you're training that's very specific to acceleration. And if and all you had to do is take that person and turn them at a 45-degree, and it would look like he's accelerating, right? Yeah, at the bottom of his step. Yeah, obviously without the other leg working, but yeah.
And especially when you split the feet, makes it a little bit more pronounced in terms of getting the shins forward.
Absolutely. So, it's just not going to get the return. I think Chris and I have been talking about that for 15, 17 years now, but and most of us, right? Dan too, together, we probably were talking about it before that. And we figured out that, hey, and I'm not going to say that maybe light squat's not going to do it, but like light squatting or squat jumps will do it before once you get to the higher level than the heavy back squat. Because we learned in my track and field teams that, man, if we just kept heavy back squatting people, the diminishing returns started to take place, and you saw them.
Yeah.
And we were testing everything, right? And we learned that with my track coach Phil Lundeen 26 years ago, right? It wasn't that hard.
Mm-hmm. I think this is a perfect segue. We've kind of talked hover deadlift. We talked tendons a little bit, and I'm going to word it as the upper and the lower shank maybe there, Dan. So, Dan, I heard you say this in a presentation. At top speeds, the muscles are stabilizers, and the tendons make you go. Right? At top speeds, the muscles are the stabilizers, and the tendons make you go. Please let me know if I'm misquoting you there. So when we're talking acceleration, how much tendon is there? Right?
Well,
are muscles making you go more? And so then is the weight room really a great place to build this?
Well, first of all, the tendons above the knee are positional tendons, right? So you have your patella tendon, your quad, your hamstring, and those are big push muscles in acceleration. So I believe that you can train them like that, right? So they're not as springy as you would be vertically in maximal velocity. So there are different ways and different angles in which to train them, because the muscular system does need to stabilize to be able to propel yourself in acceleration. But those tendons in your Achilles, they're trained a little bit differently at top speed than they are in acceleration. So I think understanding the difference between them, if you just look at them too, right? They're shorter. Above the knee, we're shorter tendons. Below the knee, we're longer.
All right. And then for you, Chris, with kind of this in mind, coming from more of we're just going to call it sprint world, I'd love your thoughts here too on, all right, we're training acceleration, how much tendon is involved versus how much weight room, build muscle force is involved.
Nobody really knows. I mean, if our muscles were that important, elite sprinters would be ginormous. But I think there's got to be a balance between everything. I mean, muscles certainly have a role, without a doubt. But I think timing has a role between everything. I don't know. That's a tough question. I really don't know.
I think you have to think about what the muscle's being asked to do in each phase, right? So like I said,
it's constant.
Yeah. So you have to be able to absorb energy. You have to. So the muscles have to be able to ricochet off the ground. If they are,
let's back up there. I think the first role that muscles have is to hold everything in place upon contact.
Yeah.
And so from there, now all the research is the faster people don't have great co-contractions. But I think after that moment of contact, muscles are bringing limbs into place to hit the ground. But then the moment of contact, you've got to hold the knee in place, you've got to hold the ankle in place, you've got to hold the hip in place, the spine in place, and you get that co-contraction, and then you're going to have different things let go. And the tendons are just there to help carry that energy, which makes you springier. I think if you anesthetized like your vastus medialis or your vastus lateralis and you had someone sprint, you'd have a major problem on the first step that they took with that leg where they're missing that muscle. So I think it is such a complex situation, and it's one of constant change and adjustment that it's really hard to pinpoint. For me, it's hard to pinpoint what's going on where. Like today, I had someone here and they were asking questions about, front side and back side mechanics and what role do the tendons play in bringing the leg through. They play a role, but so do muscles. It's not just a recoil. There's got to be something that initiates the leg to come through. Tendons they carry energy, but the muscle's going to be the thing that actually helps bring it through. So I think there's a co-play at different stages at every moment of a sprint.
Okay. And so Cal,
at top end speed, a jog's completely different. If you're jogging, it's much more muscular than a top end sprint.
So Cal, working with college hockey players and women gold medalist Olympians as well, you're hearing about Chris and Dan talk about, man, the tendon, the muscle, everything they kind of do here. You're working in a very hip dominant type of sport. When you're thinking acceleration, whether it's on ice or off ice, how much thought are you putting into training the hips specifically for that? Like, is there I'm training hip tendons for more elastic recoil or anything like that kind of going through your mind?
Well, I guess I train them all the tendons differently at each phase. Like we're going back to an eccentric phase next week, right? I told the guys to start eating more chicken wings, and if they can take supplements like glycine, leucine to help heal the tendons with vitamin C, obviously with all that stress we're applying. But so I go heavy tendon loading, I go light tendon loading when you cycle it down to my speed training in the weight room. When I say speed, it's not just running. It's every load is between 25 and 50% at high velocity and violently. Right, it's like my gym is so loud because we do things violently with bands. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, it's just the process of the tendon. There's a process to training that tendon, right? And that's where I feel the value of the eccentrics and then cycling to the isometrics for optimal, right? You could people talk, well, you can switch it around. Sure, you can switch it around, but when I tested it both weights for optimal performance, in the end, it was eccentrics then isos in that sequence. That's a whole nother podcast. And then I go to the power phase where we're training between 50 and 75%, and then we go below 50, so it's really 50 to 25%. And we train those tendons extremely fast to be reactive. Well, not the tendons to be reactive, but the muscles to support the tendons. So, yeah, I mean, and do I do it? I think it just happens in my program to get us results for acceleration. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So, and honestly, in all those testing years, I know that people would say there was a study done where if you increase your running speed, it didn't match that you would increase your skating. Well, all I got to say to that study is that they must have been horrible athletes because not one of my athletes, if you're a good skater and you get better at running, you're going to get faster at skating. There's just it's not an option, right? And I only have 24 years of looking at that, seeing if that's the case, and it was not the case. Everyone got faster. If they got faster running, we tested her on ice and they got faster skating. It was end of story. So, which makes sense, right?
Yeah, I would highly agree. We could throw. Great.